Hi, hello. Today's video is going to be about apartment hunting in Portugal. If you've been following me, then you know that I am looking for a new apartment. My landlord sold the apartment, but also my lease is coming to an end, and I wasn't going to renew anyway because my current apartment does not have an elevator and I have to climb 40 steps when I leave and come back to go to the apartment. So I was going to be looking for a new apartment anyway. So I've been looking online. I've reached out to different realtors. I've set up appointments and I've looked at several apartments already. So today I want to talk about some of the biggest surprises that I have found out while looking at apartments in Portugal. One thing I want to mention is that the photos versus reality can be a whole nother thing. The pricing can be all over the place. And luxury does not always mean luxurious. And some of the bigger apartments, you get a much better value for your money. All right, so let's get right into it. Okay, so luxury does not always mean luxury. Now, I guess luxury, that word luxury can mean different things to different people. I looked at a so-called luxury apartment and the photos looked pretty decent, went to see it in person. Actually, the owner met me, who was a very nice man, very nice man. He was showing me the apartment and telling me how his wife designed the apartment, and it has like sometimes they have like some wallpaper or some sort of like paneling or the paint color. I did like the fact that, it wasn't like white walls. The majority of the apartment had a nice, like maybe like a silver light gray color. But the primary bedroom had this, I wasn't crazy about the green, but I was like, oh, I'm not gonna let that, deter me or whatever. And the kitchen was, I called it retro. It was very old, but I actually liked the kitchen because it was big. It was a larger galley style kitchen. And it had like these retro, knobs. I thought the kitchen had style, actually. But the fridge was very small, which that's kind of common in Portugal. But this is a luxury apartment, had a very small refrigerator, and the washer and dryer was also small in this luxury apartment. I think they were calling it luxury because it was pretty big. It was very spacious, had a fireplace, and it had some, I guess they call these chandeliers fancy, I guess lighting fixtures. I'm not going to call them chandeliers. I didn't think they were fancy, but it looked like an upgrade. Beautiful wood floors. And it had this very large garage space where it looked like it could fit 4 cars. Huge garage space. So when I think of luxury, that was not what I was looking for, or not what I would consider luxury. I would consider it a decent apartment, but definitely not luxury. Oh, and the biggest thing is this luxury apartment did not have air conditioning. It had, several heating units, the old-fashioned heating units, because it was an older apartment. So it didn't have the individual AC units, but it had no AC. But that was a luxury apartment. So, yeah. So luxury is a word that I've noticed in some of the listings are used a lot. And some of the luxury comes with a higher price tag. Some of them comes with a decent price tag, but I wouldn't really consider it luxury. But still decent apartments. So the word luxury, in my opinion, is used very loosely. apartment prices can be like all over the place. And I'm not sure if there was a rhyme or reason. I think the apartments that were closer to the center of Porto were higher priced. And once you moved outside of the city, the pricing seemed to go down. But then in some cases it didn't. So I think it really depends on the owner, because some of these same apartments could be hundreds of dollars more or hundreds of dollars less. So I really think it depends on the owner, and also of course location too, but also the owner. Like this one apartment that I saw, and I think because it was very centrally located and it was a 1 bedroom, but it was about the same price as what I'm paying for a 3 bedroom. But I think because it was right there, city center of the city, so it was centrally located. So, you kind of get what you pay for. You're paying for convenience, so that's going to cost you more. Some of the more so-called fancier apartments, I saw apartments that were like $4,000, $5,000, just shot up. And I'm like, where did they get this pricing from? They just pull it out of the air? And it wasn't like some over-the-top luxury apartment, but I guess some of them might have had a little view or whatever, the location. But I guess if people are willing to pay these prices, they can just throw them up there. So the pricing was all over the place. Some of the newer apartments, some were priced higher and some were priced reasonable, but none of them really had like a wow factor. I don't even know what a wow factor is these days, to tell you the truth, because one thing I just know is that there's so many variances when it comes to these apartments in Portugal. You got to make sure you got AC if that's important to you. Do you want heating? Is that important to you? So it was just a lot to consider. And you can have apartments that are the same size, or smaller apartments can be higher than bigger apartments, larger apartments. So I don't even know if the pricing made sense. Like I said, I just really think it depends on the landlord. Yeah. And I think I talked about this earlier with the luxury apartment. Just don't assume that it's going to have AC. Some of the apartments don't have heat, and some apartments don't have AC. The majority of the apartments that I saw, because I guess in my particular price range, did have heat, but AC is not guaranteed. And then there was an apartment that had, like, they couldn't decide. They had the old-fashioned heating units, like the radiators. Then they had the newer AC and heating units up on the wall, the individual units up on the ceiling. And I was like, why do they have two different heating and AC units? And the realtor was like, oh, because the owner wants, the person can decide, which one they want to use. And I was like, what? Because it was so clutter. It was visually clutter because the apartment wasn't that big anyway. And you got the old-fashioned radiator, then you got the clunky unit up here. My eyes just immediately went to both of them, and I was like, what an odd thing to do. It's like, pick one and go with it. But yeah, I just thought that was really odd. And then because they had two units like that in the kitchen, which should have been a beautiful, maybe like pantry space, you open it up and they had the unit right there in the kitchen, taking up kitchen space. I'm like, what? So, yeah, just different. Okay, so I looked at some quote brand new apartments because there's a lot of construction going around in Portugal, in Porto especially, and a lot of apartments are getting renovated. They got brand new apartments. So I looked at a brand new apartment, photographed very well, but once I got there, uh, it just felt boxy, felt tight. I mean, as soon as you walked in the door, boom, you just like fell into the apartment. My apartment that I currently have has like an entryway, it's like a hallway. So you don't walk in the door and boom, you fall into the apartment. So I didn't like that. And also, the newer apartments, for whatever reason, have the kitchens towards like the back of the apartment. So like if there is a balcony or sliding glass door, the kitchen is going to be right next to that, which I think that's kind of an odd placement. And the kitchens in the newer spaces are not that big. It's almost basically, maybe like one solid counter, and they're trying to have like a little smaller island, but because it's like an odd placement, it's like, what are you going to do with this little island that's right there? It just didn't make sense. And I noticed that some of the newer buildings, I guess they're trying to cater to expats and trying to give you some amenities. They threw in like this, oh, we have a gym. And it was like this room where they might have just threw in like 5 pieces of equipment or whatever. And they were calling that a gym. So, and I'm sure this is not all the apartments in Portugal. I know it is not. So don't get in the comments and say, oh, well, my apartment, blah, blah, blah. I know there's buildings that have all the bells and whistles, okay? I'm talking about the ones that I saw in my experience, okay? And of course, I have not seen all the apartments in Portugal, just some of them. But the newer apartments, the ones that I saw, the spaces are tighter and they all just felt the same, the same as the realtor was calling it, builders, the builder's appliances, because she was talking about this apartment. Oh, he did an upgrade on the builder selection. This is an upgrade. She was talking about the brand of the stove and the brand of the washer was an upgrade. And that might have been true, but if you have an odd layout, it doesn't really make sense. To me, it doesn't matter what kind of appliance you have. So, yeah. And some of the balconies look pretty great from the photo, but then when you open the door, oh my gosh, they're so noisy. You can't even sit out there because this one apartment looked like the balcony was facing like a park. And I think they even said that. Well, they kind of took the photo from an angle because you can only see the park when you look in that direction, the far right. But if you're sitting in the center, there's like a main street. And when you open the balcony's door, it's a whole bunch of noise. So how can you even enjoy sitting out there? So the photos can sometimes be a little misleading. And that's why you got to go see them in person and see how it feels. So it's been an adventure. Also, some of the newer apartments, some of them don't really have a whole lot of storage. When I was looking at apartments, I was like, okay, where is my vacuum going to go? Where are my mops going to go? Stuff like that, stuff that I don't want to see. I'm spoiled with my apartment and I have my own laundry room. I can put stuff. I don't have to see that stuff. So the new apartments are kind of tight with how they're using the space. because, I guess they're just trying to get as many apartments as they can in the building. So, we can have a fancier looking so-called room, but we don't have to worry about storage, or we don't, because people are only thinking about how it looks versus how functional it is. I'm looking for something that looks pretty good, but it's also very functional. Because if it looks good and I can't put my stuff, where am I going to put my stuff? Yeah, that's just not going to work for me. So we talked about newer apartments. We talked about some older apartments. So then I switched gears and said, okay, let me look at some older apartments. And that's where the reality, I was like, oh, the older apartments, this is where you're going to get more for your buck, more bang for your buck. They're going to be spacious. They're going to have tons of storage, tons. You might even be lucky and get like a huge bathtub. You're going to get maybe storage in your garage plus garage space. You can get a balcony. You can get big kitchens, laundry room with with the sink. You could get the works in an older apartment. The things are, it's just you just got to find the right older apartment. And because they are, I think, a really good value, I think the older apartments are going faster than the newer apartments. So when you're looking at older apartments, you got to be ready to go. Because I looked at this one apartment and I thought it was pretty nice. Pretty decent area. Spacious as heck. More space than my apartment that I have right now, and it costs less. But it was nice. It had a working fireplace. It had a huge bathtub. It was a three and 3.5, something like that. Big kitchen. I mean, everything. It had the works. Beautiful wood floors. Beautiful doors for the closets, because it was older, so it was all like solid and beautiful. But that apartment, when I went to look at it, somebody was coming out, and those people got that apartment. They were there before I was there, so it was like a first come first serve thing, and they got the apartment. So I think those apartments go a lot quicker, because people are realizing that, new, it depends on, new doesn't always mean better. Now that I've looked at several apartments, the new versus the old, because I don't need new. I think it needs to be functional. Plus, I just want to get the best value for my money too. So, but the newer apartments, no, the building has zero amenities. None of that. But how many people really use the amenities in your building? So if you're coming to Portugal looking for an apartment, focus on the older apartments. I think you'll get much value for your money. And of course, you don't want some older apartment with a bad energy rating. You want it to be well insulated with a good energy rating and all that good stuff. And hopefully it has AC and heat. But I think heat is more important than AC, because you can get some really decent fans. I was trying to think about the last summer, did I really use my AC that much? I don't think so. I'm not a big AC person. Because I was sitting in my living room the other day and got a little warm. I was like, oh, I have this little fan. Turned it on. I could barely let it stay on in 5 minutes. It felt like AC. So don't let that be a deterrence. I don't think that should be a deterrence. That's just my personal opinion. You might feel like you need it, but I'm just basing it on my experience here. Okay, the apartment layouts. Some of these apartment layouts, like I walked into the one apartment that was the 1 bedroom that I thought it was the cutest apartment. if I didn't have like no furniture at all and was just starting out and just needed a place to just land, I would have chose that small. It was so small. I mean, you walked in, boom, you were in the space. The thing that I loved about the apartment, it had this cutest balcony with a view of like the clergy tower, and the kitchen was beautiful. It had a nice sized refrigerator, counter space, big windows in the kitchen. Matter of fact, the kitchen felt bigger than the living room. The living room was so small. So that's why I talk about the odd layout. The living space, I was like, oh, well, wait a minute. Could you even fit a couch in here? Maybe a two-seater couch and maybe a small table and a lamp. You cannot put a TV in there. I mean, I don't know, unless you could mount it. I don't know where you could put the TV, but it was a small living space. When I say small, it was small. And the kitchen, to me, didn't match the living space. And the kitchen had this beautiful window that, okay, beautiful counter right here, but the window opened like this way. And I was like, well, wait a minute. We have stuff on the counter and you want to open a window. How is that going to work? Where are you going to put your stuff? So it was, and I said, well, does the window pop up like this? And she says, oh, I don't think so. So it was just an odd layout. But it had the cutest little balcony ever. Cutest. It was stone silent. You could not hear anything. It was a great location. Small in an odd layout. And another apartment with this odd layout from the photos had floor to ceiling windows. So I was like, oh wow, this might be it. These windows are beautiful. I go to the apartment and I walked in the door and I was like, whoa, wait a second. Because I walk in thinking about where am I going to put my stuff, okay? So the windows were like this and they curved around. The windows took up almost the whole room. So much that there was really only one wall, okay? So if you put your couch against the wall or if you put your TV against the wall, where was your couch going to go? And the reason why it was so odd, because remember I mentioned that some of the kitchens are at the end? Well, the kitchen was right next to the windows that go to the balcony. So is your couch going to face the kitchen? I mean, there was no way. It was such an odd layout. Why was the kitchen right there? It was like all one, I guess it was all in one space, but because of the beautiful windows, I just didn't see how it would work. It didn't make sense to me. So, when I talk about odd layouts, some of these apartments are, not making sense. Then it was an apartment where she said, oh, they took down the wall, or they put the wall up. They did some kind of renovation, but they turned the living room into like a galley space. It was like a little box and like this long hall to get to your bedroom, which wasn't even supposed to be a hallway. It was in the living room. I was like, well, what are you going to do with that hallway? So I think sometimes when they try to renovate or try to do something special or whatever, like those windows was supposedly a renovated apartment, they aren't thinking about how can people function in this space. Just trying to make it more decorative or more visually appealing or whatever. But to me, it has to make sense. It has to be functional to me. And those layouts were not very functional. So the next one is location versus space. So I think that the closer you're into the city, the more you're going to pay. And the apartments are Not necessarily going to be smaller, but if they are bigger, you're going to pay a higher price for it because, location, location, location. So if you want a bigger apartment for, I'm not even going to say less money because the prices are all over the place, but I think you can find better value if you go away from Porto, if you go towards the older apartment. Okay, so some of the lessons that I've learned is that you might have to rethink what you think you want. So your perception might be different from the actual reality of the situation. The photos might look one way, and once you get there, it might be something different. Also, be clear on your non-negotiables, whatever they are, be clear on that. And you might have to adjust some of your expectations because what you think you're going to get and what's actually the reality of the situation might be something different. So I'm like taking a step back, like, okay, so this is what you're going to get for this. This is what you're not going to get. So I'm deciding what's more important to me because I was thinking new. I want something new. I want an elevator, blah, blah, blah. Yes, the older apartments have elevators. So now I'm kind of rethinking my whole approach here. So be flexible, know your negotiables, stick to your budget, and make sure you see it in person. And you should be okay. So if you found this video helpful, make sure you like and share and hype it up so other people can watch it. And make sure you turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. So good luck in your apartment search in Portugal. Ciao, ciao, and thanks for watching.